Jodi Hildebrandt is a disgraced therapist who was arrested a few months ago on allegations of multiple counts of child abuse. The case broke when some of Ruby Frankie's children, who were under her supervision at the time, escaped from her home to ask for help from a neighbor, showing signs of being tied up, being malnourished, and otherwise just abused. After these arrests, after all these allegations and all these details about how Jodi Hildebrandt had abused her power and abused clients in the past before, after all of that came out, she has now taken a plea deal, which we're going to react to today. What's up everyone, my name is Isaiah. I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Virginia. We've been following this Ruby Frankie and Jodi Hildebrandt case. A couple of days ago, Ruby Frankie made her plea agreement. Today we are reacting to Jodi Hildebrandt submitting her plea deal. Now, I'm not here to do a breakdown of the legal aspects of the case. That's not my wheelhouse. What I will do is react to some of the statements that her lawyer makes. So we're reacting to two separate videos from the Law and Crime Network. Along the way, I want to dig into some of the ways that Jodi Hildebrandt abused her position as a therapist. Beyond the obvious things like interviews that have come out with Adam Steed and with Jesse Hildebrandt, I want to dig into how she has violated the ethical principles of the therapy profession. And so you can advocate for yourself and know what is appropriate or not appropriate for a therapist to be doing. Before we get into this video, please make sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the content that we're putting out, live streams, reaction videos, and other videos just about education about mental health and advocating for yourself in the mental health care space. Let's dive into it.
Ms. Hildebrandt, I've been handed a written document, a plea agreement with your signature on it. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And you did that to represent to the court that you have read the document carefully, that you understand what you've read, that you agree to all of the terms that are set forth in that written document?
Yes, sir.
You've had sufficient time to ask Mr. Terry any questions that you have about the agreement or its potential effect?
Yes.
Is anyone pressuring you to enter into this agreement, or is anyone promising you anything that I haven't been told about or that is not in the written document?
No.
Are you under the influence of alcohol or drugs today?
No.
Is there anything today that could interfere in any way with your ability to understand the agreement, its potential consequences?
No.
All of these questions to clarify that she's in her right mind, not being coerced in some way to make this plea agreement, are actually really interesting because it really mirrors some of the informed consent that we talk about in the therapeutic space. So informed consent is basically that you as a consenting individual agree to participate in therapy. And part of that informed consent is that you have to understand the implications of that beyond the basics of just agreeing to attend the sessions and things like that, that you understand the options that are being presented to you in terms of therapeutic interventions, you understand their expertise and their training, and because you have that information, you can enter into an agreement to do therapy with them. And so that's kind of what's going on here, that she understands the implications that's been explained to her by her attorney, and so she can make this choice willingly.
No physical condition, mental health, or emotional condition, nothing that could interfere with your present ability to evaluate the agreement and decide if it's what you're prepared to do today?
No.
I don't know if this is normal, but her attorney is looking over at her a lot as if he's not sure if she's going to answer the way that she's supposed to. I don't know if she didn't feel quite right about taking this plea agreement or whatever, but he's checking over to make sure that she is going to answer correctly.
You don't need more time, you're ready to go.
Yes.
Any further record, counsel?
Your Honor, the agreement contains a factual basis. There are a few details in the factual basis that we are not in full agreement with. However, this is a guilty plea. It is not an Alford plea. The factual basis sets forth facts that we agree with, that Ms. Hildebrandt agrees with, that are sufficient for the court to accept her plea with respect to the 4 counts to which she is pleading guilty.
Okay, that's a lot of legal jargon that I don't understand, something about factual basis, but what I get is that she's still pleading guilty despite whatever way that her attorney sounds like he might be hedging their bets. If you're a lawyer, go ahead and comment below so we can better understand what's going on with this plea agreement, because it seems a little less straightforward than what was going on in the Ruby Frankie plea deal.
And so we ask the court to accept her plea agreement.
And apart from what is in the written factual base in the plea agreement, you have I'm assuming, reviewed voluminous discovery, you don't dispute whether there is an actual or an adequate factual basis.
We do not.
All right, then. Anything else before the court receives Ms. Hildebrandt's pleas?
No, Your Honor.
Nothing for the state, Your Honor.
Then, Ms. Hildebrandt, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, also aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
The court finds that there is a sufficient factual basis. The court, in addition, finds that Ms. Hildebrandt's pleas are made knowingly and voluntarily. The court therefore accepts and enters those pleas, dismisses the remaining 2 counts.
I'm curious about this. Again, lawyers who are maybe more familiar with this kind of situation, how do they pick which counts to plead guilty to? Because from my ear, they all sound the same. What I heard in the Ruby Frankie case is that they all carry similar, if not the same, potential sentence. So how do you pick counts 1 and 3 as opposed to 2 and 5 or whatever it is? So that's something I'd be curious to know.
We are anticipating a PSI, although part of the plea agreement appears to be that Ms. Hildebrandt will not contest a prison sentence.
Correct.
Is that right?
That is correct. But we are asking for a PSI.
All right, then the court orders the preparation of a pre-sentence investigation report and sets sentencing at 10:30 a.m. on February 20th.
Okay, so that first video, not much going on in terms of what to talk about therapeutically, but definitely from the interplay between the Ruby Frankie plea deal, which was predicated on her testifying against Jodi Hildebrandt, and now Hildebrandt now taking a plea deal. So I assume that means there's not going to be a case, but like he talked about, there will be a pre-sentencing investigation that I assume will turn up details that will impact how they go about the sentencing for, I guess, Jodi Hildebrandt's case, but I would imagine that for Ruby Frankie's case, it would be something similar. So let's dive into the second video now, where we are listening to the defense attorney talk to the press afterwards.
I haven't had much to say about this case prior to today because I didn't feel it was appropriate to do so until today. Ms. Hildebrandt, my client, has pled guilty today to 4 counts. She has done so because she takes responsibility for her conduct in this matter. Her guilty pleas, she decided to plead guilty before Ms. Frankie entered into her plea agreement or agreed to cooperate with the state. She has pled guilty because she did not want these children to have to testify.
There is a lot of PR going on here, saying that Jodi Hildebrandt had wanted to take responsibility for her actions when she has not in the past, that she had decided to take the plea before Ruby Frankie decided to take the plea, and those decisions were independent of one another, and that she didn't want the kids to testify. I have a hard time in my mind reconciling that she would be so concerned about the kids being traumatized by having to testify in court about their experiences when she was tying them up, advocating for their abuse beforehand. But I guess he's got to say what he's got to say, so let's keep listening.
She takes responsibility, and it is her main concern at this point that these children can heal, both physically and emotionally.
Again, really at odds with the way that she was conducting herself as a parenting coach and expert, and in the way that she had taken care of Jesse Hildebrandt when Jesse was under Jodi's care. She didn't care too much about their physical and mental well-being then.
We look forward to sentencing. That's all I have to say today.
There are people all over the world that are coming out and saying that Jodi Hildebrandt has destroyed families, that she has hurt a lot of people. Has she seen this kind of the backlash that's happening, and what does she have to say about it?
I'm not going to have any more comment, nor is she, at least prior to sentencing.
I think that's the question that's really big on everyone's minds. While this case is specifically about the allegations of abuse, in this particular case, this reporter or whoever is asking the question is absolutely right. Jodi Hildebrandt had a much farther reach than beyond these 6 counts of child abuse in terms of victimizing families, couples, children. So we'll talk about that in a little bit after we finish reacting to what this defense attorney is going to say.
Thank you.
When will the sentencing take place?
February 20th. Thank
Can you
you.
just terms of the agreement as far as how that pertains to sentencing, and is there a specific range that the court has agreed to?
She's agreed to a prison sentence, 4 counts consecutive, the same as Ms. Frankie. Exactly the same as Ms. Frankie.
In Utah, there's rumors about consecutive sentences. How long could her sentence term be then? Could all 4 be consecutive together?
Ultimately, it's up to the Utah Board of Pardons, and I'm not going to speculate at this point how long she might serve. Thank you.
So like I said before, there's not too much going on therapeutically at this case. A lot of it is just legal now, but it is interesting and helpful to have some kind of follow-up and to be able to wrap up some of what we've been exploring and talking about over the past couple of months in terms of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. What I want to transition to talking about is a little bit about what that reporter asked about, that there are more families, there are more kids, there are more individuals who have been negatively impacted by the way Jodi Hildebrandt conducted herself as a therapist. So I want to go through the different ethical values and principles that the ACA, the American Counseling Association, pushes and advocates for every counselor and every therapist to hold to, and how Jodi messed with each one of those. So let's dig into that now. So those 5 basic ethical principles that the ACA advocates for every counselor and therapist include non-maleficence, doing no harm, beneficence, seeking the good of your client, autonomy, which is giving them choice and independence in their treatment, fidelity, doing your duty to your client, and then justice, seeking on a micro level fairness for your clients, and then on a macro level justice in terms of society and equity. And so as we dive into talking about these values, this is not just to keep dumping on Jodi Hildebrandt. I don't need to make a video doing that. I think everyone kind of knows that she was not behaving in the proper capacity as a mental health professional. But I think it's helpful to break down why some of the things that she did was problematic, so that we can take that to the therapists that we see or the counselors that we're interviewing to work with us in terms of our mental health, so that we can know what to look for, what's problematic, what's appropriate. Our mental health professionals living up to those values, if they are, or if they're not, how do I need to address that concern? So let's talk about non-maleficence. That's at like the very basic, the very core, just doing no harm. And obviously we saw Jodi Hildebrandt violate that multiple times with Adam Steed, with the couples that she worked with, separating them, more often than not making the husband out to be the problem, targeting them, and seeking out retribution and destroying people's credibility in their lives when they tried to call her out or have some accountability for her. Beyond that too, you know, as counselors, we can do harm by practicing in areas that we are not competent in. And so if a client is coming to me with a diagnosis I've never worked with before, I've never had any training in it, or if I'm trying to do a certain intervention that I've never had any training in, that could potentially do harm to the client. And so even if I might not be benefiting them, I have to be practicing competently and making sure that I am not hurting them in the process. The next step from there is beneficence, seeking the good of my client, working towards their good within that professional capacity. And you saw this be a problem with Jodi Hildebrandt when one of the videos that we reacted to, a former client and victim of hers said that she would split up her couples so that they would have to go to men's groups and women's groups, and they would do individual sessions with her, and that became revenue streams for her because she was taking one couple that she might be seeing once a week or however frequently, and now they were seeking her services multiple times a week, and she was making more money out of it. This was not benefiting the clients, it was benefiting her because she was making more money off of them that way. Now, it's not a crime for therapists to make money. We have to make our living somehow. But the thing is, she was making her decisions based on benefit to herself and benefit to her bank account rather than what was actually helpful for the clients. And so let's talk about fidelity. I think of this as kind of my duty to my clients. Am I properly serving them in their needs and what they're expressing to me? And clearly Jodi Hildebrandt did not do that. She had her ideas of how relationships worked, and she applied that as a one-size-fits-all solution. Separate the husband from the family because he's obviously the problem, split them up, more often than not working towards any kind of reconciliation. Just her way of thinking about things or they can hit the road and she'll destroy their reputations in the process. It was a no-win situation for her clients, and she was not doing her proper duty to her clients. Again, it was a very self-serving kind of practice. So let's follow that up with talking about autonomy. Again, we talked a little bit about autonomy when it came to informed consent. Clients should always have the option to fire me or find a different therapist that better works for them. And I'm always working towards them being independent, making choices that line up with their own values, not with my values, because that might serve them for a little amount of time. But then that's not really them being true to what their beliefs are, their religious, spiritual beliefs, or just their character in general. And so like we talked about, Jodi Hildebrandt was very on her thing that she carried over to the Connections classroom about like distortion or whatever that was. And it's important for people who are clients in the mental health space to be able to know that not every intervention works for every person. Not every medication works for every person, and not every style of therapy works for every person. And so you have a right as a consumer and as a client to be able to say, this is working for me, this is not working for me. And so it's a responsibility of the therapist to make that work for you, whether it means they alter their style, change the tools that they're using, or refer you to someone who can better serve what you need and what you're looking for. If not, and they're just pushing their own agenda, their own interpretation of things, if it's systemic and happens over and over again, like the therapist is always right and you just have to change your opinions and the way you're looking at things to match what they're saying, that's violating your autonomy, and that's a problem. And finally, as we touch on justice, man, how the tables have turned in terms of how Jodi Hildebrandt is negotiating the lines of justice. Before, she was in the position of power and she was using her connection with the LDS Church, hiding behind their authority, hiding behind her authority as a licensed mental health professional in the state of Utah, to be able to do these things, get away with them, and continue to build up business because the LDS Church was recommending her and sending people to her. For her to do that kind of work with them, that was very problematic and damaging to a lot of people. You know, she was attacking and lying about her victims. I mean, I think the earliest case that we heard about was with Jodi Hildebrandt, who was not her client, but her niece. And so that whatever Jodi was saying would not be taken seriously. She did the same thing with trying to discredit Adam Steed by damaging his academic and social reputations. And so there was a lot of twisting of justice and using the systems that were in place for her own ends and to protect herself. And while it is just a couple of cases, a couple of allegations, in the larger picture of Jodi Hildebrandt's career, I think it's important that she's now on the opposite side of that, that there is actual truth coming out and that she is actually going to face the consequences of some of her choices. But again, like I said, this video is not just about bashing Jodi Hildebrandt. I think everyone gets the idea that she was not a great therapist and she was not conducting herself professionally. But the idea is, what does it mean to be a good professional? What does it mean to live up to some of these values? And here's the tricky thing. Mental health is still in a very early stage of development as a career field, as a facet of health that we concern ourselves with. And so it's really important that as these standards are being shaped, as professionals are going into the field, that we continue to advocate so that people can know what they should expect from their therapist, what is professional, what is right and what is wrong and what is harmful, because we have this implicit trust of mental health professionals. Otherwise, we wouldn't go and share all of this stuff with them. So that's why it's important for consumers and clients to be able to know these things, like in the case of Jodi Hildebrandt, they're not taken advantage of. Everyone, thank you so much for checking out this video. I don't know if this is the last one. I think the judge had set the sentencing for February of 2024, so I might see you back on this case then. But up until then, I think this has been a really important case. This speaks to a lot about counselor identity, how we conduct ourselves, and especially for clients, people who are trying to navigate that mental health care system, to know and be able to see, like, these are wrong, these are abuses of power, and therapy should not be done that way. And so I hope some of this breakdown can help to understand that and be able to explain that and find good therapists that are able to serve you ethically and in a way that is going to be beneficial for you. Again, please like and subscribe, stay up to date with our content, and I'll see you next time.